Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to week 5. For this week, it's going to be a bit light with the videos, but you're going to have activity 1, and that's going to be due at the end of the week. So keep an eye on the announcements, and if you have any problems with that, feel free to get in touch with me or the TAs or to post questions on the forums. So for this week, we'll talk about Booleans, we'll talk about function returns, the function as a type, and also how to build bigger programs using functions. And in this video, we'll cover those first 2 topics. So Booleans, they're the result of, for example, conditional expressions. 5 greater than 2, 5 less than 2, and so on. What I'd like you to know about Booleans is that they can either be true or false, and they can't be anything else. And if you ever want to check the type of some value, this one happens to be Boolean, you can write out type. So here I've printed the type of 5 greater than 2, and it's class bool or Boolean. If you want to read up on Booleans, if you want to read a little bit more, you can go to this link. This function, or this activity, because it has to do with both Booleans and returns, we'll come back to it in a sec. So, function returns. We've seen that we can print at the end of functions. We've also seen that we can return some value, or in the case of the assignment, a list. But what else can we do? So we can, for one thing, we can have more than one return value. In the case of, for example, conditionals, we have an if-else, and we can return true if this, otherwise false. And we can keep going, and we can have else-ifs and more returns. But the point is that we can have more than one return value. Let's go back to here, to this function, and try this exercise out. So we're going to write a function called isNegative, and it's going to do what you think it would do. It would return true if the value is negative, false if it's not negative. So let's try it. Let's define it. IsNegative. The parameter is n, and if the number is negative, we'll return true. How would the number be negative? Well, if the number is less than 0, it would be negative. Otherwise, we'll just return false. And we can test this by calling it. So we can print the call. So the call will be isNegative, and we can give it a value. Let's say -5. So, -5 is a negative number, so the result of the isNegative function is true. What if we try a non-negative number like 0? So the result of putting a non-negative number into the function is false, because 0 is not negative. Let's move on to this next activity. This has to do with this divisible by function with multiple returns. And what is it doing? It's checking to see if A is divisible by B. Is 4 divisible by 2? Well, without looking at the function, 4 is divisible by 2, and it's not divisible by 3. But what is it really doing? What's this statement here? If you remember from last week, this percentage sign is the modulus operator. And what it does is it gives you the remainder when you divide A by B. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and there's no remainder there. But 4 divided by 3 has a remainder of 1. So for 4 mod 2, we call this 4 mod 2. The result would be 0, so it would be true. For mod 3 would be non-zero, it would be 1, and we would therefore skip this, go here, and it would return false. Let's test it out. Okay, we'll call the function, and we'll put values for 2. So again, we would expect this to be true because 4 is divisible by 2. Good. If we try 4, 3, we would expect false because 4 is not divisible by 3. 4 mod 3, or the remainder of when you divide 4 by 3, is not 0. So we wouldn't enter this body. We would skip to the else and return false. The next part of this, it says write a new function called not divisible by. And to do that, we can just change our existing function. Instead of divisible by, we'll call it not divisible by. We have the same parameters. The only real difference here is we want to return true if a is not divisible by b. So in other words, if a mod b is not equal to 0. When we call it, it has a different name this time. It's not divisible by. We'll try with 4, 2. We know that 4 is divisible by 2. So the result of not divisible by should be false. For 4, 3, we know that 4 is not divisible by 3. So the result of not divisible by is true. In the next video, we'll talk about the function type and also about how to build larger programs with functions.